I'm going to kick this off. You guys know me. I'm Jen, and I'm going to be a little provocative because, frankly, I'm tired of hearing about data. I think it's the industry's next four-letter word. And the reason why is because there's so many people talking about data that I think it's confusing to the dealers. Data has become this almost like a nest of just stuff, and it really shouldn't be. It should be a conversation about specific instances. It's kind of like AI is just an amorphous blob. Well, data is really important. We all know that. Customer data, prospect data, that's information about our customers. So I kind of want to personalize it and make it more relevant to the dealership operation. Instead of referring to it as just data, these are individual facts and fields and pieces of information that are really important about our customers. Mm-hmm. I feel super comfortable about that area of it. In the inventory area, I used to feel more comfortable than I do today, but there's so much there, right? Because you have the vehicles that you have on the lot. You've got information about how long you have them, how quickly they turn, information that comes to you from competitors about inventory, and then all the additional really robust data that you can get from your OEs and from other companies like Data One Software about the value of those vehicles. So let's talk about the vehicles. Let's talk about the customers. Let's talk about our prospects. And then, of course, there's the whole business area, right? There's the business function. And how do we manage the health of our business? And that's also data, but it's more than data. It's really important information. So I don't like to use the word data. I like to use the word facts and information, because it makes it more real, makes it more personal. The word data to me is this just random thing. So that's where I stand. So to me, it's a four-letter word.
I would totally agree. So you guys know this is Lori from Charisma Communications. I work with a lot of technology companies, and data is definitely scary for people right now, especially as AI is coming into the picture. Alana can talk more about that. I think data is, crucial for AI and for making it work. But I do think that we've made it more difficult than it needs to be. I love the idea. We all have talked about audience segmentation and really I like the idea of changing data to basically customer types, right? And it's the result of what you get from the data is really what we should be looking at when we talk about that.
Yeah, and this actually reminds me of my recent dealer marketing article. This is Ilana Shabtai. I wrote, if you don't use it, you lose it. So we could talk about data all day long, but it's what are you actually doing with your data when it does come to customers or to inventory? Jen, to your point, and all the different ways that you can actually look at your data. How are you actually making a strategy around it? And that also, by the way, can be confusing to dealers, I think, strategy around data. That's just as confusing as a four-letter word. Really thinking about it beyond that, and also using vendors and other partners and making sure you're hiring the right people within the dealership to actually put those strategies and processes in place to actually use the data.
Right.
I agree. And Jackie here from Kelly Blue Book and B Auto, Cox Automotive. So we are the king of having all the data. There's so much of it, and I feel like it's very confusing to dealers because of the fact that there's no standardization across our industry in what data is measured, how it's measured, the parameters they're using, all of your different third-party partnerships and what you're getting from your OEMs, your parents, and just kind of figuring out what works for your dealership, and everybody speaking the same language. And it gets very confusing when your vendors talk about different time frames, different ways they measure, different things that are important to them, when really we should be figuring out what's the most important thing and kind of making it more of a standardized measurement, because we don't want to go to our dealers and confuse them. We're probably saying the same things, but in different ways. And it looks like there's conflicting data and information when oftentimes there's not. There's just different toggles and parameters set in each of our tools, which I find is interesting to address every day.
Yeah, even when we onboard dealers, right, they'll be like, okay, well, how do you measure a lead? Which when I first came into automotive, I was mind blown. What do you mean? They're like, oh, well, some people measure a lead by time on site. how, someone's on my site for X amount of seconds. I was like, no, we do not measure a lead like that. So it's so interesting that even what seems the basics to some of us is just, it's not standardized at all throughout the industry. I think we've definitely gotten better, but I would love to see that standardization across the industry.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And Brian Pash has done a really good job with his GA4 initiative and trying to standardize things there. I don't know how successful he's been, but I just know he's been vocal about it. And I've heard of the STAR organization that does a lot through NADA on API integration standardization. So who could be a leader? I mean, Jackie, you're at Cox, the big elephant in the room. Who can be a leader in saying, okay, everybody offers value in different ways, but hey, why don't we get together and create some standards here? Is that something that would be counterproductive, do you think, for Cox to do?
No, I think there is that's a great opportunity, right? And I think those things are being worked on, but I think you run into the issue where nobody wants to give up all of the access to all of their data, because everybody in the third party world and even in the dealership world on the reverse of it thinks that their data is the strongest. It should be protected. So sometimes, for example, on the reverse side of that, we'll even get that from dealers that, certain companies they want to work with because they don't require access to their DMS or their CRM information, even if there's ironclad privacy contracts put in place. And then some do want to work with that and don't mind giving it up because they have a different trust factor. And they feel like if they're allowing the flow of data back and forth, it's more accurate and more valuable, which is true in a sense. So I think everyone on every side of the house would have to have like a complete trust factor going on. And that's probably not a reality, although it seems really like a nice idea. It would just be hard to get everybody on board in our whole industry with that. Not saying that to be mean, but just the reality of it is
I think part of the standardization would be also make sure the data is actually passed in a secure way. And there are certain standards, that we can make sure everyone is aligned, at least abiding by. And then it's the dealers then own prioritization, right? Do they they know that they're working within these standards. I mean, we're talking about like this ideal world, right? So who knows? But the first step would be standardizing that, including how we actually pass data. And then the second would be, okay, dealers who are still, hesitant would unfortunately give up the better customer experience. And then the competition is at a whole different level.
Right.
That's exactly what sorry, Jen, that's exactly what I was going to say with the clients I work with. It's not even, you guys you're all experts on data. And so you're talking about standardization. A lot of the dealers that my clients work with don't want to handle the data. They're like, I just don't give it to me, because they don't know exactly what to do with it. And I think we need some transparency too, right? I mean, honestly, most people don't trust even their third-party vendors to be telling them the truth about their own data. And so I think there's also that other factor of like, do they trust that we're giving them the right data and that they can use it effectively to create programs?
If you have this data lake in this place where all the customer data lives, and you get information from a website and information from another lead source, and it appends this record for this customer, right? How do you know which is right?
So if I understand your question correctly, first and foremost, we do have a data lake. I will say all of the customer databases are separate. I think that is important. It's not like we have this aggregate data and all the dealership data is combined. We do have the aggregate data, but it's anonymized, meaning the dealership data is not shared. So I just want to make that distinction, just so it doesn't seem like
in the dealership, if you've got this where all this stuff is being pulled into, how do you know what is accurate, what's right, what's correct?
So it really depends. First of all, a lot of it is first party data. So first party data is the data that the dealership owns, and it's everything that happens directly with the dealership's data, like with their actual CRM customers interacting with their website or opening up an email, right? That's their first party data. So it's all accurate because it's first party. When it comes to third party data, anyone that has that integration with us, it's the data that they're sending to us. So it's again through that secure API, secure integration, and we're going to match the records based on that. So it's not like we're pulling unauthorized data from different places and mixing it into one customer record. In that specific case, I'm not sure how that would be accurate. I mean, I'm sure there is a way to make it accurate, but it's also, it's not the cleanest way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Every data that we obtain in any way, right, is a sample.
Right.
Because you're never going to have access to all the people and all the things they're doing online. There's different ways that doesn't happen. So I think, having real-time data at your fingertips is one thing, and it's one very big part of this. But we had a discussion with a dealership panel last week in Boston with a big group of Cox Automotive folks. And we were talking to them about, how do we deal with this frustration of having all of this great data? And then sometimes if there's a group at individual store levels, you'll get people that do use the data and other people that don't dig into it and don't, really dig through it and innovate and strategize and refresh those strategies based on things like buying signals and following consumers around on their shopping journeys, which we can see because we have all these great properties. So we have a great sample size of those shoppers and what they're doing, and we can pinpoint low-hanging fruit. But the other piece of that is you have all this data. It's overwhelming as a human resource issue at a dealership to weed through it. And honestly, we didn't get great answers from them about that because it's a case-by-case basis, right? So you throw this human interaction into the data world, and you have all of this great data at your fingertips, but it's not always easy and possible to weed through it all and utilize it how you're supposed to at every level of a dealership and in every department, right? Sales, F&I, fixed ops, all of the things that we know impact a dealer's P&L, not just sales, especially as what we do every day is selling. So
Yeah, especially on the service side.
I was just going to say, I have a great example of that from the other day. I was talking to a client of mine on the fixed ops side, and this is a perfect example of having the data, but maybe it not being entirely accurate. He was talking about with acquisitions of vehicles and recalls. Think about how many of us, right, have gotten the letter in the mail, like your 2017 Highlander Toyota. I'm like, I got rid of that like 4 years ago. So the information, the data, they have the customer data is technically correct. I did buy the Toyota, but I'm 3 owners down now. So I think that's, it'll be interesting. And this individual client has technology that can now like text message the correct person. And so I think we're going to see more and more like technology helping to pick up some of the slack with some of the wrong data.
A lot of customer data platforms, a lot of what the value there is identity resolution and making sure that you have the updated customer record, right? So we'll know that Lori bought a Highlander in 2017, but we'll also know that since then she's leased 2 cars and came in for service. And that updated customer record that's like the gold for dealerships.
That's the valuable part of it.
Yeah.
Correct.
And then
a lot of waste increases efficiency, which everyone's looking to do.
Yeah,
exactly. And Jackie, you mentioned before about we have all this data, but a human can't really even necessarily process all of it. So that reminded me in the beginning of the conversation, Lori, what you said, which is like, where does AI fit into all this?
Yeah.
But I think that's a really valuable role for AI, because the innovation with AI right now is so much faster than it's ever been. But a lot of it has to do with processing data. So like human can't process data the way AI can. And so you have all this data and you want to use it. That's where the AI comes in a really efficient way for dealerships.
Well, I'm piggybacking on what you said before. AI can only be effective if it's using accurate data, right? So that's the linchpin. It's like we need the accurate data to be moving into the AI, because what is feeding it is what it's coming out on the other end. So that's where the accuracy and transparency is so important as we move forward.
And humans review it in the process. Like, think about what we went through for several years of testing using QR codes. It was like the worst. It was QR. Everybody's like, they don't work, they're not right. And now everybody's using them again because they figured out how to use them and what they're effective for through testing. So I feel like we're going to see that a lot with data and AI and how it ties together, and human resources reviewing the AI and how that process is going to best work and best be efficient. So interesting.
I feel like we could thank Corona for the success of QR codes. Like the QR codes, COVID was the best thing that could have happened to QR codes.
100%. 100%.
It's like, we don't want to touch anything. QR codes are coming back. And it was just, that's it. And we figured it out.
You're right. The restaurants push the QR code push.
Yeah.
With the menus.
Yeah, and they won't give it up. I was at a restaurant just about a week or so ago, and the waiter comes over and says, "Yeah, you order using the QR code." I'm like, "Well, what are you here for?"
Talk about it this same way with AI a few years down the road from now. We're going to be like, oh, remember that time?
No, 100%. But I
No,
think you're right. AI, people are terrified of AI. I mean, and I have a client right now who AI can handle everything behind the scenes in terms of like finding recalls, scheduling it, finding an open bay, finding and dealers are like, I don't know, because it's taking a lot of the control off their plate. But I think this is going to be more and more and more what we see over the next, 5 years. I think we'll be having this exact discussion in 4 years about AI.
Yeah,
I'd love to go off script and pose a question to you guys, if that's okay. We don't really have a script, but you know what I mean. I'd just love to say that if you had one piece of advice for your dealer clients of anything to do with data, any way to look at data, any way to decipher data, any big piece of advice, one or two quick things that you would tell your clients surrounding data.
I would say a lot, but if I really had to say one thing, I would say unsilo your data as much as possible, because again, like the data, if it's living in silos, is really not that helpful. Here, Lori's example is perfect. Again, there's data that she got at Highlander. There's the data that she's in another car or somewhere else. Like silo data does not work for the modern day shopper.
Yeah,
that's what I would say.
That advice, that's great.
I think I would go towards cleaning your customer information and vehicle information and making that an ongoing effort, because the data, the information is not valuable unless it is accurate, accessible to Elena's point, but accurate. So I think that's not something that's done once. It's a constant evolution and ensuring data is input properly and maintained properly. So for me, it's all about making sure the information is accurate and clean.
Okay, you girls you're gonna hate this answer. But I trust everyone on this call. You come from wonderful companies. I think my biggest piece of advice would be to get someone in, either understand your data very, very well yourself, or get someone in-house to understand the data, and then work with your third-party vendors. Because it's not that, as to Jackie's point, it's not that anyone's trying to pull wool over your eyes. It's just everyone measures success in different ways depending on what companies come in. So April Simmons, one of our other very good friends, right, always says you have to understand your own data first in order to know how it's going to affect your organization. So that would honestly be my biggest piece of advice. If you don't understand the data, get someone in-house who does, that can work with your vendors.
Now, why would you say we would hate that? I think it's a great idea.
Well, I mean, it sounds like I'm calling you guys out for being like non-transparent, which I'm not.
No, not at all. Actually, that even that advice I use internally at FullPath for the marketing team as well. Meaning they really wanted us. Well, obviously everyone wants you to double MQLs all the time, right? So they were like, okay, just double the budget and then you'll get double the MQLs. And I was like, no. Like I did a full audit of our data. I know exactly what that's going to do. That's going to give us crappy leads at a higher cost per lead. Yes. And that's not going to do us anything. But I wouldn't have been able to actually really give an answer, because sometimes that does work. It just depends on your own data. So I think for a dealership, that's extremely valuable for them to actually know what their data ecosystem is, so that they can then make data-driven decisions. So I liked it a lot.
Okay, good. All right, I take it back.
Thanks for the kind caveat there, and I think that's great too. We're all talking about the same thing. We're all talking about getting the data and having human resources to be able to help you weed through it and analyze it and use it. And I love what everyone said about overlapping, and it doesn't do well in silos. I agree with all of that. I would say, just as a dealer, it's easy to let the data make you have an emotional response. Just be aware when you're talking to your different vendors. Everyone's bringing you their data. Everyone's putting their best foot forward. but stop a moment and think about the different measurements. Very rarely is it an apples to apples comparison. Very rarely are standards even present. There are none set in our industry. So just know what you're looking at, really. Ask about what the timeframes are in the data. Ask about what each definition means. I know, like, if you go into some of our properties, there's always an information button on everything you would look at in vAuto, and it just shows you, like, this is what this means, so that you know what you're looking at and you're not viewing it in a different way. I've had people within the company send data to dealers that's different than same people within a different business unit. So it's not just the competitors, it's sometimes the reports are not set in the same way, and dealers change things and we have access to them. And just know what you're looking at and know what you're reading, and try to just decipher what these things mean. And if you want to see it a different way, ask if that's possible. Sometimes it's customizable, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a button that you control and you're not even maybe aware that that option is out there. And if you do want to see something and you have a really good partner, they may or may not be able to get a change made in how you view your data, but it's good to give that feedback in a respectful way, because we can fight for change and innovations as you guys know what you need to see as dealers, right? So always let us know. I know our company is very proactive with that. I'm sure you are as well. And we want to know what you want to see and what's valuable to you and why something does or doesn't work anymore. Just keep that feedback coming. I know it takes a minute, but it's really important for us to give you what you need to see data wise.
We're talking a lot about data, and we talked a little bit about AI. I think these are obviously huge trends for 2024. Specific predictions that you guys have on data in 2024, I'd love to hear from both of you.
I love predictions. I think, and I talked a little bit about this with Alana last week, but it's going to be a really difficult year about data predictions, because I feel like we're going to have an increase of data and we're going to have a lot of data that shifts. So the situation with new car and used car right now is going to create us an opportunity to pay more attention to the data, because we're going to be having things rolled into that, like finances and the real estate market and interest rates and a political year and all of this stuff that's coming up, that's going to make us have to pay attention to the data in a minute way. And what I mean by that is you're just going to miss it. It's going to go flying past you with all the changes that are going to be coming. So I would please beg everyone to pay attention to everything now. Get on board with AI. Do not miss a step with AI. It is happening. It is here. You will be behind, just like we talked about before. You don't need a pandemic to throw you into digital retailing, just like you don't need something major to happen to throw you into AI. Start learning about it now, or get deeper into it now, and listen to your trusted advisors like the Loris and Alanas of the world that can kind of speak to that, because we have some products on our side that are early adopters of AI. And then we want to make sure we have everything adopted with AI and merged together with all of our business unit partners. So kind of trying to figure that out on our end. If that's a priority for us, it's a priority in the industry, and kind of getting everybody on useful AI platforms that aren't fighting with each other as well. So that's a big focus. I'll flip it to you now, Lori. I think I said a lot.
Yeah, perfect. I don't know if mine are so much predictions, but they're more of like kind of trend movements I'm seeing in the market, really. And I think one of the most interesting and cool right now is AI uses in the service industry and fixed ops. So I'll show you a couple different ways that clients of mine are like kind of using that. They're using it for acquisitions of used cars, right, to bring back in. That's huge. A lot of companies are looking through all of the data that we're talking about. This is where kind of my Toyota Highlander example came in, to find those vehicles that would be great for trade-ins, and then acquire those back and then automatically schedule them for their appointment. I'm seeing it in like buying of streaming services. We have a company who does streaming service buying, and the data there is so fascinating, because he was saying a lot of people want the name brands, right, like Hulu. But if you really dig into the data, maybe you see that Peacock is actually like bringing you more viewers with a lower cost. And that's kind of what you were referring to, Alana. And then the third really thing that I'm seeing that's so cool is this idea of sentiment analysis within all of the data that's coming our way from customers. And all that means is you can tell if someone's having a negative or positive experience immediately based on AI and other technologies, looking through the communication that's coming through. So I just think, again, I hate to keep coming back to AI because I feel like that's all I've talked about this podcast, but it really is. I see so many of my clients are making huge, huge strides, especially in the fixed ops space with this technology. So I think we're just going to, and data is so critically important to AI. I think that it's just like right in line with what we're talking about here. Alana, tell us yours.
So you guys, I don't know how I'm going to beat that. The one thing I'll say is, and I don't know if this is necessarily either a prediction, but maybe a trend or maybe something new that we should be looking at, but we talk a lot about inventory data and we talk a lot about customer data, but we don't necessarily talk about it together. So in 2024, I think it's a lot about how obviously unsiloing your data, which I've been talking about a lot, but what does that actually mean? It means you can actually run queries and look at, okay, I have, X amount of vehicles that have been hard to move. Let me pull a list of customers that are interested in that vehicle that I might know because they were on my site or they opened up an email or they looked at a similar vehicle. I mean, being able to run those types of queries and combine my inventory data and my customer data for the best customer experience and for the best outcome for a dealership business. That's what I'm hoping for this year.
Yeah. I mean, and I'll take that even one step further. What if you had those two, so inventory, customer, and then you had targeted, like we're talking about audience segments or audience, used your data to create audience avatars, and then you know exactly what to say and how to sell to those individuals.
And that's also, by the way, where fixed ops, of course, comes in, meaning you're talking about the full customer journey. So once you have that data together, you can then really create customers for life, right? Because you have equity data and you have the sale and service data. I mean, you could literally be making thousands more dollars per customer a year based on that data.
How to prioritize all of that through service lane acquisition and where to prioritize your lead sources that are coming in because you're cross-referencing it with the consumers that are shopping for what you may not have, but what you may be able to grab.
Yeah. And we talked a lot about like data and AI and software, but honestly, that goes down to also the people and process and training at the dealership too. Make sure that they have the tools, that the talk tracks and the tools and they're trained and they feel comfortable and they have a good back and forth with the manager and with the sales team. I mean, we can talk about this all day, but I do think it's like people, process, technology all together. That's never going to change in automotive.
100%. 100%. As you guys were talking, I'm like, how many dealers are we giving headaches right now that they're like, oh my gosh, the amount of but I think the people, right? You just need the people. Like you said it perfectly, people, process, technology. That's the way it should go. I totally agree.
And compensating your people, especially those really valued, fixed ops folks that, if you show them appreciation, they will dig in and get those vehicles that you want for your different departments, integrating that data as well.
It all works together. I totally agree.